But what are some of the reasons that people are out of whack like that? What
Oh,
causes it?
mate, it's a lifestyle. Go down to the local shopping mall and just sit down there for 10 minutes and look around you. Even you go to a coffee shop, and most people are looking down because they've got their mobile phones in front of them, so they're like this, and their heads on this on an angle. You know, your head weighs about 5 to 6 kilos, but when you put it on to this tilt like that, it goes up to more than 27 kilos. So you've got that weight going into your spine, top of your spine. And then, the young kids, they're students, so they're spending a lot of time writing or on their keyboards working. So their posture's in that position here like that, which we call kyphotic. So they're like that. Well, that puts stress on further down the back. And if you're then going to go out and do some running, that loads down your hamstring. So the thing we need to do is strengthen that. And I've used this term a lot, and I'm not sure who to really attribute it to, so I'll claim it, but it's really not mine. But you've got to strengthen what you stretch and stretch what you strengthen. So if you're in this position, you've got to stretch your front out and strengthen your back out to take you back into this posture so that you're more upright. And that will take the load off your back, but you'll be able to run better. People, especially the boys I've got coming in, for running or even in the clinic, they want to have a bigger chest and they're wondering, how much should I have to bench? Well, half the problem, it's not a bench. They need to work on their back so that their chest actually gets in the right position. So, but yeah, posture is key for me. So work on that. I see posture as like the launch pad for performance. Think of a rocket and you're shooting for the stars. Well, you want a pretty good launch pad for that rocket. Well, my rocket are the athletes that I work with, whatever sport they're in. So I've got to make sure my launch pad is as solid as it possibly can be. And that starts with things like posture. It starts with things like their movement, their basic movement patterns, and the coordination patterns, and so on. So get all those things in place, and then the rest becomes relatively easy.
Yeah, I've been driving down to Melbourne. I'm in Point Lonsdale, so it's about an hour and a half on a good
Mm.
day each way. And I've been doing that about 3 days a week for maybe the last 12 months. And at home, a lot of the time my work is done. I've got a stand up desk and I'm trying to be more, I am fairly conscious of it. Like the majority of my training is I'll do some strength, I'll do flexibility and some form of cardio. I'm starting to introduce a little more stability and just keeping things
Mm.
fun, just trying to keep it interesting to me. Not a whole heap of coordination, which is something I guess that's in another category, but something I'm trying to stay on top of just as my young boy gets older so I can still beat him at one-on-one basketball. But driving down to Melbourne for the first time a little while ago, I noticed that my coccyx had
Mm.
developed like a little bit of a dull pain. And I went to the gym like I always do each Wednesday, and I was going through my deadlift routine. Went through a warm up set, and I felt like a little bit. It felt slightly weak just at the lower part of my back, and I thought, okay, I'll take it easy. So I went up to 70 kilos, which is usually I'll sort of push towards 90, or on a good day maybe 100 for some of the reps, and went to 70, which should have been comfortable. And after about the second rep, I just felt this. At the time, I had no idea what it was. The next day, I realized it was a strain,
Mm.
and oh my goodness, like the just the lack of function or the function that you lose through an injury like that absolutely blew my mind. But it was sort of a double faceted interest point to me because the first thing was I think the weakness had developed when I'd just been spending so much time in a weird position in the car. And
Mm.
then also just having a bit of a wake up call as to how important spinal health is. I mean, they're two things that I probably knew, but I'd never really experienced directly.
No, but
And it took about a month.
no, I see it a lot. I mean, everyone knows it, but not very many people actually understand. And it's very difficult to understand unless you're experiencing it firsthand. And look, it's probably not from sitting in the car. That just highlights or exacerbates the condition that you've got. But a lot of it comes from, again, lack of strength in your postural muscles of your low back. So strengthening those muscles. I hear people say, oh, I don't do strength work because I'm a distance runner. I don't want to get big. Well, it's not about being a distance runner. You don't understand strength training. You don't have to get big doing strength training. Strength training doesn't have to equate to being a bodybuilder. So
Mm.
you need to strengthen those muscles through there. Uh, One of my favourite forms of strength is actually Pilates, and Pilates is really underrated, I think, for track athletes, particularly endurance-based athletes, because it's really postural and movement, and it's about elongating muscle length. It's actually strength training for ballet dancers, but it translates very well for runners. But again, we spend a lot of our time in flexion. So flexion's when you're like seated and think like an L, that's flexion. But when we perform, we're in extension. So that's a straight line and pushing back behind you. So again, from a training, a coaching point of view, I really enjoy giving my athletes things like hills and sleds. And people think, oh, you just like that because it gets them fit. Yes, it does get them fit and strong, but it also it exaggerates that position of extension and movement through that full range, which is what we're trying to get. So maybe if you are experiencing that, I'd be talking to you about, without having a look at what's going on from a postural point of view, all of that's okay, I'd be then looking at how do we strengthen your postural muscles of your lower back. I wouldn't be doing deadlifts for strengthening that, even though that is one. I wouldn't go there if you're having issues. And then I'd be getting you doing activities like sled, towing a sled, or hill runs, just a gentle hill. When I talk about hill, I'm not talking about like Anderson Street Hill where you're slogging up the hill. Just a 10-degree gradient is all you need.